Well, let's turn now to the United States state of Colorado, where the Supreme Court has ruled that former President Donald Trump is disqualified from being part of the presidential election in the state. But Mr. Trump and his campaign office are crying foul against the bombshell ruling as an act of injustice. For more on this ruling, Elwayne, diplomat and resident, School of International Science, American University, joins me live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us on The World Now. The Colorado Supreme Court says it found clear and convincing evidence former President Trump engaged in insurrection, but it was a split ruling with 3 judges on the court believing there is no legal basis to exclude Mr. Trump from the ballot against those 4 who think otherwise. How sharply divided would you say the country is as regards where Donald Trump whether he did commit insurrection or this is a witch hunt?
Well, I think the country is very much divided. In a poll, actually, that just came out this morning, over 58% of those polls said they believe that Trump committed serious crimes. On the other hand, a majority of Republican voters, a large majority, continue to support him as a candidate for the presidency. And so there is a deep split. The independent voters seem to be very key in this, with a number of them believing that he did commit crimes and who would be affected if he were convicted of committing those crimes. But right now, this issue is going to go to the Supreme Court. Those who oppose the ruling in Colorado have appealed it to the Supreme Court. And also this week, Trump's lawyers are supposed to present to the Supreme Court a reply to the federal prosecutor in the January 6th case, who has asked the Supreme Court to rule whether or not former President Trump, is in fact immune from any charges relating to crimes that took place while he was in office.
So this is the first time Section 3 of the 14th Amendment has been used to disqualify a presidential candidate. Donald Trump is also the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges, but his approval rating isn't doing badly. A few days ago, is at 46%, slightly higher than that of President Biden. Is there a sense with which these cases have done nothing to diminish his popularity and in fact seem to have energized his supporters and tightened his grip on the Republican race?
Well, I think you've got the characterization right. Very, very strangely, there are many people who do not like a number of the policies that Trump followed while he was president, but they're very unhappy with the performance of President Biden. I think it's probably a little too early to decide how they might vote next year, but certainly he is getting many people indicating that they would vote for him or will consider voting for him, and many of the American people are just very unhappy still with the state of affairs in the United States. So that gives him an opening. On the other hand, there's a very sharp partisan divide and a lot of polarization about how to handle the charges against President Trump, and particularly in the last several weeks, he's talked about putting in place a number of authoritarian measures on the first day he comes to office. And there are a number of scholars preparing for him recommendations of how to take bold actions on that first or second day, which many people fear would endanger democratic practices in the United States.
Very interesting. Do you think President Biden has enough time to change the tide before election year?
I do think so. I think as the election gets closer, people will be thinking more seriously. I think many of the voters that have been questioned admit they have not been following very closely the charges against President Trump. Also, the U.S. economy seems to be improving. And actually seems to have weathered what many people thought was a real chance of recession. So I think that will start to sink in with voters. Inflation has come down. And so I think we'll have to wait for a few months before people are really focused and make these decisions about how they really want to vote.
Absolutely. Donald Trump is favorite to become the Republican pick in November's election. How much of a setback is this particular court judgment when it goes to the Supreme Court for his ambition on election year? I'm asking how much of a threat this particular case will be to Donald Trump's ambition when it goes to the Supreme Court.
Well, I think if the Supreme Court upheld the position of the Colorado Supreme Court, I think you would see other states also follow suit. That could make it very difficult for President Trump to compete, even though Colorado was not thought to be one of those states that he could potentially win. But I think the focus is really going to be on the Supreme Court, and they are put in a very difficult situation of having to make decisions on these two different issues. One, does President Trump have immunity for any acts that he committed while he was president? And two, how to respond to this innovative application of the provision of the Constitution that bars people who violated their oath to the Constitution and participated in insurrection. As you said earlier, this is the first time that's ever been applied, but it could have an impact down the road if the Supreme Court lets it stand.
Joe Biden won in Colorado against Donald Trump in 2020 by a wide margin. And some say it's unlikely that Mr. Trump will need to win the state to win the election. But when you look at the mix of everything happening to the former president at this time, what chances would you say stand, for this much talked about election?
Well, I think what we have right now is a great deal of uncertainty about where these legal cases will go, at what impact that will have. We don't have uncertainty that President Trump is very popular with a big chunk of the Republican Party. That is quite clear. But where he stands as we move forward, how much these legal cases will impact is yet to be seen. A number of people in polls have said that if he were convicted of some of these crimes, they would seriously reconsider their vote and their support for him.
All right, we understand this name will remain on the ballot in Colorado until the Supreme Court, eventually make its ruling. We'll see how that plays out. Thank you so much for your contribution. Elwin is a diplomat in residence, School of International Science, American University. Glad to have you on the program always.
Thank you very much.